Do you ever have anxiety dreams? You know, like dreaming you have a deadline you just can't meet, or you have to take a test you're not ready for? Here's one. I'm back in seminary. I have worked for years at my training, and it all comes down to a final exam. If I don't pass, I don't get ordained. And I'm handed a piece of paper with the final essay question. Just 2 words. Explain God. Explain God? You got to be kidding me. And then I see the fine print. Use both sides of the paper if necessary. If that dream was true, I never would have gotten ordained. You can't explain God. By definition, God is beyond human understanding. There is a little poem from the 17th century I kind of like, and it goes like this. God far exceeds the word that can ever be expressed. In silence, God is heard. In silence, worshipped best. You can't explain God. You can only experience God. Moses did. He encountered God in a burning bush on the holy mountain. And when Moses asked God for his name, what God says is a little hard to understand. No surprise, since you just can't explain God. In the Hebrew, God says something like, I am, or I am what I will be, or I am what I do. We're not quite sure how to translate it. God seems to be saying to Moses, you'll find out. In other words, you can't explain God, you can only experience God. This narrative of the burning bush is one of the greatest stories in all the Hebrew Bible. Now, the Jewish tradition and our own Christian tradition not only tell stories, we tell stories about stories. And there's an old story about the story of the burning bush. Long, long ago, a Gentile, a pagan, came to a rabbi named Joshua to ask about this particular story. Rabbi, why did God choose a thorn bush of all things as the place from which to speak to Moses? And Rabbi Joshua said, God chose the humble thorn bush to teach us that there's no place on earth without God's presence, not even a humble thorn bush. You can't explain God. You can only experience God. And we can experience God anywhere. Moses met God in that bush so that Moses could learn to see God everywhere. Jesus met God at a river and then out in the wilderness so that Jesus could see God everywhere. And then Moses and Jesus taught their followers the same thing. Holy ground is everywhere. This is the Holy Land. This is the sacred moment. If we experience God here in church, it's so that we can meet up with God out there too. If we find God in this sacrament of bread and wine, it is so that we can see all meals as holy, all food as sacred. All ground is holy ground. Now, you've got to know that I have a whole ton of wonderful memories about the youth and the children of St. Mark's. For example, I remember this Easter season, a bunch of years ago now. The altar was gorgeously decorated with our Easter garden, and when it was time for the kids to come upstairs from Sunday school halfway through the service, one of the little boys impulsively broke away from his mom, and he ran down here to the front. And he saw the big, beautiful Easter banners and the tall Easter Paschal candle and all the other candles and this bank of flowers and even a water fountain up here. And he looked at all this and he shouted, "Oh, wow!" And I think that was his way of shouting, "Hallelujah." He was on holy ground in that moment. And I hope we can all have that feeling from time to time. A moment when we are overcome by the sacred. And then, either silently or aloud, we shout, "Oh, wow." I wish we could be aware all the time of the wonder of creation. I wish we could be aware all the time of the wonder of our Creator. I wish we could be aware all the time of the wonder of our own lives. We're always on holy ground. One of the best ways I can think of to build this awareness is to pay attention to the natural world. After all, nature is the art of God the Creator. I know people who say that the woods are their cathedral. I know of a great 19th century preacher who said this: "Of all human works of art, a cathedral is the greatest, but a vast and majestic tree is greater still." There was a gifted poet of the 20th century named Robinson Jeffers, and he thought about the vast universe of billions of stars and galaxies discovered by astronomers. Earth is just a pale blue speck in all that infinity. And Jeffers wrote this: "It's only a little planet, but how beautiful it is." There is a Navajo prayer that I recite every day on my walk. "With beauty before me, may I walk. With beauty behind me, may I walk. With beauty above me, may I walk. With beauty all around me, may I walk." As God said to Moses, "You are on holy ground." And as one of St. Mark's kids once said, "Oh, wow." Amen.